Section 9 of The Watergate Report, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Final Report of the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, Volume 2. J. Fife Symington. J. Fife Symington was appointed by President Nixon as ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago in June 1969, and served in that position until his resignation in November 1970. As stated earlier, the incident involving Symington was the basis for Kalmbach's conviction. Symington was appointed by Kalmbach as the Maryland finance chairman for Nixon's 1968 campaign. Symington was also a contributor to that campaign. During the course of the campaign, Symington indicated to Kalmbach his interest in becoming an ambassador. After the election, Kalmbach recalled that on several occasions Symington met with him to urge his consideration. Kalmbach said, quote, "His name was on a list of people who had been contributors and workers, as someone who expressed an interest in an ambassadorship," end quote, which was furnished to Peter Flanagan by Mr. Stans. Symington received an appointment to Trinidad and Tobago in June 1969, but felt he should have been posted in Western Europe. Thereafter, Kalmbach said, quote, "He would call me from time to time, and he made it very plain to me that in view of how much he worked on behalf of the president," end quote, and because, quote, "his wife's aunt, I think it is Helen Frick of Pittsburgh, had been a very major contributor to the president, he felt that he had not been accorded as major a post as he should have been," end quote. In September 1970, Symington called Kalmbach and asked to see him. A few days later, on September 16, Symington flew to L.A. and was met at the airport by Kalmbach. During lunch at the California Club, Symington explained the purpose of his visit. Kalmbach recalled, "He said that the humidity was terrible in Trinidad, and it was affecting his wife in such a manner that he was giving serious consideration to resigning and coming back home. He repeated then the fact that he liked being an ambassador, and he felt he should have been appointed to a European post in 1969, but that now, with a year or so of experience in Trinidad, he was ready to go to a major post or a more major post, and particularly talking about a European post, and that was what he wanted to do, was to talk to me about this, and he wanted my support with the White House to secure such an appointment. Now, about that time I said, 'Fife, I've been involved in a senatorial campaign program. I'm soliciting funds. I don't think I've talked to you about this before, but I would like to talk to you about your financial help for this program.' And I described the program. He said, 'Herb, Marcy and I will contribute $100,000 to the president and the 1972 program. Now, if you want to split it up, that is your decision and the decision of the White House. But I want to make it plain that I'll make this pledge, but before I make this pledge firm, Herb, I would like to be certain that I will receive an appointment to a European post.' And I said, 'Well, Fife, I just don't have the authority to do more than I've done before, and that is give you my word I'll act as a reference, and I'll support your candidacy for a major post.' He said, 'Herb, with all respect, that isn't good enough.' He said, 'I've got to have the assurance from Bob Haldeman.' And I said, 'Fife, I can't do that, you know.' And he said, 'Why don't you call him?' And I said, 'Okay, I will.'" Kalmbach then went on to describe his efforts to reach Haldeman and obtain a commitment for a European post for Symington. "I went to the telephone and called Bob Haldeman. And it's my memory that when the operator came on, she then put me through to Larry Higby. And it's my memory, too, that they picked him up in Chicago, that evidently Bob and the president were in Chicago on that day. And I described to Higby my conversation, the fact that Symington wanted a European appointment, that he was willing to make this pledge, give $50,000 in 1970 and $50,000 in 1972. And I said, Larry, I want to be told whether this is acceptable or not. And it was precisely understood in our conversation that Symington was asking for a commitment. Larry said, Herb, let me call you back. And I said, all right. And I returned to the table, and it seemed to me I got a call at the club within a matter of minutes. Now, whether it was 15 minutes or 30 minutes, I don't know. But when Higby came on the phone, he said, Herb, the answer is go. You can go ahead on that. And I said, fine, Larry. And as I remember, that was about the extent of the conversation. I went back to the table and so informed Ambassador Symington, and he said, all right, then. In fact, a commitment has been made, and I agreed with that. There was then a discussion of the European posts that might be available. Kalmbach said he told Symington that the British and French posts were out, but there was a possibility of Spain, Portugal, and several other embassies. Symington sorted out these posts in order of his preference, and Kalmbach, quote, wrote all of this out and gave him a slip of paper which he put in his wallet, end quote. Shortly after this meeting, Symington gave Kalmbach $50,000 for the 1970 senatorial campaign. During 1971, after Symington resigned his Tobago post, Kalmbach began to talk to people at the White House about Symington's commitment and appointment. Kalmbach said he talked on several occasions to H.R. Haldeman, Lawrence Higby, Gordon Strachan, and Peter Flanagan about the commitment to Symington, including the fact that Symington was making a large campaign contribution. Kalmbach said that he also went to Stanton Anderson to talk about this appointment, and there, quote, was no question about, end quote, the commitment, although Symington's contribution activity was not discussed. Kalmbach stated that Flanagan was the only person in the White House ever to question the commitment. Kalmbach recalled Flanagan said, quote, we didn't give him a commitment, we can't do it, end quote. To this, Kalmbach said he replied, quote, I don't care how you slice it, you did, and it came right out of Bob's office. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of honor, and we live up to what we say we will do, end quote. After this, Kalmbach said that he wrote several letters to the White House expressing his view on this matter. Also, he continued to go back and forth between Haldeman, Strachan, and Flanagan, but no progress was being made. Haldeman told Kalmbach that it was Flanagan who was blocking the appointment. According to Kalmbach, Haldeman said, quote, Herb, you've got to talk to Flanagan. Flanagan was blocking it, end quote. When in 1972 nothing had been done, Flanagan suggested to Kalmbach that they give Symington his money back, according to Kalmbach. Kalmbach met with Symington and told him of the problems that had been encountered, and that he was unsure if the appointment would be forthcoming. When Kalmbach told Symington that he would return his money, Symington replied, quote, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want it back. I've got the commitment, and that's all I need, end quote. Kalmbach advised Flanagan and Strachan of Symington's position. Kalmbach said that he had never discussed the commitment with the president, and added that there was no indication that anyone had discussed this matter with the president. In a letter to the committee dated June 20, 1974, Flanagan stated his recollection of his participation in discussions regarding Symington, as well as Vincent de Roulet, whose case Flanagan recalls was presented to him along with Symington's. Toward the end of 1970, or in the first part of 1971, Mr. Kalmbach asked for a meeting with me. During that meeting, he said that in the future a European ambassadorial post should be held for Mr. Symington, then ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, and another for Mr. de Roulet, then ambassador to Jamaica. I indicated that both gentlemen could be considered along with other applicants. However, Mr. Kalmbach said consideration was not sufficient as a commitment had been made. My reply was that the policy established in the 1968 campaign against any commitments remained in force, and that he had no authority to make any commitment. Mr. Kalmbach said he was aware of the limits of his authority and had checked with the White House before making the commitment. I said I believed there had been a misunderstanding and wanted to clear up this matter before proceeding further, to which he agreed. Shortly thereafter I met with Mr. Haldeman, related Mr. Kalmbach's comments to me, said this was contrary to established policy, which I believed should not be changed, and asked if Mr. Kalmbach's report was correct. Mr. Haldeman told me that Mr. Kalmbach was misinformed, that he did not have the authority to enter into commitments to Mr. Symington and Mr. de Roulet for ambassadorial posts, and that the policy against commitments remained intact. I said that I proposed to tell that to Mr. Kalmbach, and, in light of the misunderstanding, direct that he make clear to Mr. Symington and Mr. de Roulet that no commitment existed, and they could have their contributions back. Mr. Haldeman expressed no objection to this course of action. I subsequently called Mr. Kalmbach, reported my conversation with Mr. Haldeman, and told him of the agreed course of action. While Mr. Kalmbach expressed reservation as to any misunderstanding, he agreed to offer to return their contributions to Mr. Symington and Mr. de Roulet. In the case of Mr. Symington, however, based on reports, memoranda, and personal conversations with him, I understood that he would not accept his contribution back, but that he continued to feel that a commitment existed. Footnote: the Select Committee does not have access to any documents to which Flanagan refers. As noted above, the White House has refused to turn over any documentary evidence to the committee since August 7, 1973. End footnote. On this understanding, I considered the matter unresolved, and for that reason, among others, continued to oppose through the beginning of 1973 the appointment of Mr. Symington to an ambassadorial post. When given an opportunity to state their views on the above allegation, Haldeman, through his lawyer, stated that, quote, he testified regarding the subject matter before the grand jury and declines to discuss it with you, end quote. Higbee also stated that he, quote, testified fully and completely to the grand jury concerning the general matters outlined in your letter, end quote. He added that, quote, the inferences that your brief letter seems to make are not warranted, end quote. Footnote: the letter to Higbee from Chief Counsel Samuel Dash reads, the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities has received evidence that you had discussions with Herbert W. Kalmbach concerning the desires on the part of Vincent de Roulet, then ambassador to Jamaica, and J. Fife Symington, then ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, to obtain more prestigious ambassadorial posts. The evidence in the possession of the committee indicates that you had conversations with Mr. Kalmbach in which the contribution activity of these two individuals was discussed, as well as the fact that both these men had commitments for their desired posts. In addition, the committee has received evidence that you had a telephone conversation with Mr. Kalmbach on or about September 16, 1970, in which Mr. Kalmbach was assured by you, apparently following a conversation you had with H.R. Haldeman, that in exchange for a contribution totaling $100,000, that Mr. Symington could be assured of an appointment to the ambassadorial position that he preferred. End quote. End footnote. Stans, through his lawyer, observed that the applicability of executive privilege to correspondence between Stans and the White House regarding presidential appointments is being litigated in the courts, and that, quote, other evidence bearing on that same topic has been sealed by a judicial order, end quote. He concludes that, quote, "the parties thereto are bound to secrecy by the order. We must, on behalf of our client, respectfully decline to submit evidence on the subject." End quote. The committee has found nothing in any court order, however, that would prohibit Stans from responding to its inquiry. Strachan's attorney, in a communication to the committee, stated that Strachan advised him that he was aware of discussions concerning Symington's desire for the ambassadorship, but heard nothing that implied a quid pro quo. The committee was further advised that Strachan recollects that at some point he was told by Haldeman, although he cannot recall the date, that Symington was not going to get the post he sought. Anderson, in a staff interview, advised that he had no knowledge of any commitment to Symington and never discussed any such commitment with Kalmbach. In a staff interview conducted on November 16, 1973, Symington said that through 1972 he contacted Kalmbach several times about his interest in a West European ambassadorship. He said that he spoke to Kalmbach because he had a, quote, "pipeline" to the White House. Symington stated there was no, quote, "direct linkage" between his contribution and his desire for the post. In early 1972, Symington said he spoke with Peter Flanagan and told him that he was disappointed because he had been unable to secure a more desirable ambassadorship. Symington stated that Flanagan asked if he would like his wife's contribution returned, but that he turned down Flanagan's offer. Symington has received no appointment since that time. Vincent de Roulet. Vincent de Roulet, a contributor to President Nixon's 1968 campaign, was named ambassador to Jamaica in September 1969. De Roulet said of his 1968 contribution, quote, "I was seeking some position in government for which I considered myself qualified, and I knew that there were only 3 or 4 ways to get it, one of which was money." End quote. According to committee testimony and interviews, de Roulet pursued his quest for government service. De Roulet said after deciding to make a contribution in 1968, he advised Maurice Stans of this decision and also of his desire to acquire, quote, "some position in government." End quote. Stans indicated to de Roulet that he would, quote, "show an interest on his behalf." End quote. Subsequently, de Roulet received a telephone call from Stans advising him that, quote, "he had sent his name on a list to the White House." End quote. Shortly after the 1968 elections, de Roulet met with Peter Flanagan, and they discussed several possible postings. In April 1969, de Roulet was interviewed by Elliot Richardson, then Undersecretary of State, but the question of his obtaining an ambassadorship was never raised. He heard nothing more until his appointment to Jamaica was announced several months later. In early May 1970, Ambassador de Roulet invited Herbert Kalmbach to Jamaica for a birthday party. At that time, de Roulet informed Kalmbach that he was willing to contribute $100,000 to President Nixon's 1972 campaign. De Roulet said that he brought up the subject of a contribution and that the $100,000 figure had been previously decided upon by him and his wife. During their discussion, Kalmbach explained the, quote, "townhouse project," end quote, in which the White House was raising funds for various Republican Senate races in 1970. De Roulet agreed to split his $100,000 contribution between the 1970 Senate races and Mr. Nixon's 1972 campaign, as Symington had done. Kalmbach said that de Roulet indicated his willingness to contribute cash if that was Kalmbach's preference. After his visit to de Roulet, Kalmbach wrote him on May 12, 1970, thanking him for de Roulet's hospitality. The letter also contained the following paragraph. The understanding reached on the subject discussed is clear, and I am certain that you and Linda will look back in later days to a truly wonderful 8 years of service to the President and to the nation." In a staff interview, de Roulet said that it was his understanding that his $100,000 commitment was firm after their May meeting. Kalmbach, however, says that he was not under the impression at that point that a commitment had matured, even though, following his visit to Jamaica, Kalmbach had briefed Haldeman on his visit, including de Roulet's willingness to give $100,000 in 2 installments and in cash if it was preferred. Haldeman replied that cash was preferred whenever possible. Kalmbach said that the commitment was not made firm until several months later. Kalmbach said that in the early summer of 1970, he returned to Jamaica to solidify de Roulet's pledge. According to Kalmbach, at that meeting de Roulet said that before doing so, he wanted to make sure that he was not being, quote, "blackballed" for a European post in which he was interested. Kalmbach checked with Haldeman and Maurice Stans, and both responded favorably to the job being done by de Roulet. Kalmbach so informed de Roulet, who in September 1970 gave Mr. Kalmbach $50,000 in cash, which Kalmbach put in the townhouse trust fund he was managing. Kalmbach said that it was his understanding that de Roulet met with Haldeman on several occasions, and that de Roulet had a firm, quote, "commitment" for a European post. In fact, Kalmbach says that he mentioned to the people in the White House who were involved in processing candidates for ambassadorial posts, including Haldeman, Stans, Flanagan, Strachan, Higbee, and Anderson, that de Roulet had a commitment in the same way as J. Fife Symington. Once again, according to Kalmbach, only Flanagan raised any objection. Kalmbach's understanding of the above events is based largely on a handwritten memorandum dated May 10, 1970, with the caption, quote, "To 1970 contribution file. Meeting with Vincent de Roulet." End quote. The memorandum reads, "Had good meeting with Vincent de Roulet and reached the following understanding. A. He will pledge to give us $100,000 over the next 3 years, ending in 1972. Would prefer to give 25 in 1970, 25 in 1971, and 50 in 1972, but will give 50 this year and 50 in 1972 if we would so prefer. C. He, Pedge, would like to have my sponsorship for an appointment to one of the following posts at some time in the next 18 months to 2 years. A. Secretary of Protocol, B. Italy, C. Spain, D. Portugal, E. Brazil, and F. Argentina. D. No commitment was made to any of this. It was agreed that I would talk to Maury and HRH, and after advising them of our conversation, and after being certain of no negatives, I'm to so advise Pedge. His pledge would then become firm. F. Any contribution from Pedge is to completely anonymous." Some of the efforts of de Roulet to obtain support for a more prestigious ambassadorial post were summarized in a letter from de Roulet to Kalmbach dated July 12, 1971, which described a visit to Jamaica by John Connally, who at that time had recently become head of Democrats for Nixon. The Connally visit was all plus, as he was obviously glad to see me as he got off the plane from Tehran. We literally had hours of long, leisurely, humorous, sometimes serious conversation. On the way to the airport yesterday, he asked me if I would stay in Jamaica as ambassador, and I replied, no, it would not be in the American government's best interests. He then asked what I would like to do next if the president were reelected. I told Mr. Connally that I would like another mission where there was lots of substantive work in American investment, immigration, and narcotics. I mentioned perhaps Canada or Mexico, or anywhere else that would fit the description, and he stated enthusiastically he thought I would be terrific in Canada or Mexico. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that if the president is reelected and Connolly is around in any capacity, he will actively lobby for my cause. We get along very well, and our ideology is very close. I would not be surprised if he so indicated to Haldeman on Friday. He asked me what, if any, arrangements I had made, and I decided to simply tell him, you and I had had some discussions in May of 1970, and as far as I was concerned, the matter was in your hands. Connolly's return remark was, Herb is certainly the man, and you are in the right hands. De Roulet delivered the balance of his $100,000 commitment in 2 installments, $22,000 in cash to Kalmbach in September of 1971 and an additional $28,000 in cashier's checks to FCRP in late January 1972. Despite his contributions and other efforts to seek a more prestigious post, de Roulet remained as ambassador to Jamaica during the 1972 campaign. Flanagan's account of his involvement in this matter is reviewed in the previous subsection. Unlike the case of Symington, who continued to claim that a commitment existed, Flanagan said with respect to de Roulet, based on reports received shortly thereafter, I understood that Mr. de Roulet agreed that no commitment was outstanding, that he did not want his contribution returned, and he continued to hope that he would be favorably considered for a European post. On this understanding, I considered the matter satisfactorily resolved. The comments of Haldeman, Stans, Strachan, Higbee, and Anderson, or their attorneys, cited in the discussion of Symington, apply as well to this matter. In August 1973, de Roulet resigned his Jamaica post. He has received no other appointment. C. V. Whitney. Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, 74, is a wealthy New York industrialist whose experience includes Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Air Force, Undersecretary of Commerce, and an officer or director in numerous other business concerns. In a staff interview, Whitney stated that he was contacted by Lee Nunn, a vice chairman of FCRP, in late April or May of 1971, who asked him to, quote, come through in a big way for Nixon, as he was very hard up for money, end quote. Whitney told Nunn that he was a strong supporter of President Nixon and would contribute $250,000 to his campaign. About 2 weeks later, Nunn met again with Whitney. Nunn said that he knew Whitney had served his country many times before and that he wanted to know if he was open to government service. In a staff interview, Nunn stated to the committee that raising the subject was his idea and that he had not previously spoken about it with anyone else. When asked by Whitney what he had in mind, Nunn replied, according to Whitney, an ambassadorship. Whitney told Nunn he felt qualified to serve in Spain because of his long association with that country beginning in 1950 when, as Undersecretary of Commerce, he had been sent as a special envoy to England, Luxembourg, Italy, and Spain to help them recover from World War II. As recalled by Whitney, there was a further reference to Whitney's $250,000 contribution at this meeting. At no time, according to Nunn, was there any discussion of a connection between his fundraising and any sale of an ambassadorship. Shortly after this meeting, Nunn communicated to Whitney that Attorney General John Mitchell wished to see him. In early June 1971, Whitney, Mitchell, and Nunn met in Mitchell's office in the Justice Department. The Attorney General told Whitney how pleased he was that he wished to serve as ambassador to Spain and that his name would be submitted. In early June 1971, Whitney made the $250,000 contribution. During the remainder of the summer, Whitney communicated as to the status of the anticipated appointment with Peter Flanagan, who was represented to him as the person in charge of ambassadorial appointments at the White House. In October or November 1971, Nunn called Whitney and told him that he was returning his $250,000 contribution. Nunn advised Whitney that should the president submit his name for the post in Spain, Whitney would have to appear before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for confirmation. There had been publicity over the fact that Senator Fulbright had stated that he would take a dim view of persons up for confirmation who had contributed over $10,000. According to Whitney, Nunn said that he would then be able to truthfully say that he did not buy the appointment. Nunn also told Whitney, quote, he should not feel obligated to give 1 cent of his money to the campaign, end quote. At the same time, Whitney gave no indication to Nunn that he was not willing to recontribute the money at some later time after confirmation. Whitney received 2 calls from Peter Flanagan in the latter part of 1971. In the first call, Flanagan informed Whitney that there had been a delay in his consideration for appointment. The second call, in December 1971, was to inform Whitney that his name had been dropped from consideration due to his age. Before the second call, Whitney's $250,000 contribution was returned in December 1971 in the form of 50 $5,000 checks, which were dated either November 30, 1971 or December 1, 1971. These checks were drawn on accounts of the Finance Committee for Re-election of the President at the direction of Nunn. Despite the fact that both Nunn and Whitney denied that there was any correlation between Whitney's contribution and his desire to become an ambassador, it appears that at no time did Whitney offer to recontribute the $250,000. In fact, Whitney stated that he was upset over not receiving the appointment, and because of that, he refrained from contributing any money to the campaign until much later, when he made a contribution of $50,000 to the re-election effort. Nunn testified that, quote, there may have been some feeling at the committee, FCRP, that I should have pressed C.V. Whitney for a greater contribution, but Fulbright's statement was something to be considered. End quote. End of Section 9. Recording by Linda Johnson. Section 10 of the Watergate Report, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Final Report of the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, Volume 2. Role of Herbert W. Kalmbach in the campaign. Herbert W. Kalmbach was the chief fundraiser during the first 1.5 years of Nixon's re-election campaign. As the president's personal attorney who participated in the 1968 election effort, Kalmbach advised the committee that beginning in November of 1970, under the supervision of Haldeman, he canvassed scores of potentially large contributors in an effort to obtain early commitments of large contributions for the anticipated re-election effort. Kalmbach first became involved in the 1972 re-election activities when he agreed to take over control of certain surplus funds left over from the 1968 election. As reconstructed by the committee staff with the assistance of Kalmbach, it appears that in January 1969, when he obtained custody of the surplus funds at the request of Maurice Stans, the surplus amounted to $1,098,952.20. As noted elsewhere in this report, deposits to Kalmbach's fund of cash include $100,000 contributed by the milk producers on August 2, 1969. Also noted elsewhere, among the larger earlier expenditures from Kalmbach's funds were payments to Anthony Ulasewicz and Donald Segretti. In November 1970, Kalmbach was requested by Haldeman to involve himself in an early campaign fundraising. According to Kalmbach, on a number of occasions, before as well as after the November meeting, Haldeman told him to obtain cash contributions wherever he could. Thereafter, Kalmbach sought out friends in an effort to obtain what amounted to commitments for campaign contributions. Kalmbach states that he never asked for a commitment in so many words, but rather approached people, suggested an amount to them, and asked if they would accept that as a, quote, goal figure. Kalmbach acknowledged that he told contributors that there were different classes of contributors, and he had different, quote, cutoff points, for example, at $25,000, $50,000, and $100,000. Kalmbach said that on occasion he referred to a, quote, 100 club, meaning contributors who gave $100,000. He indicated that he told contributors that there were a lot of people in the $25,000 class, and if one wanted to be known as a major contributor, he should give more. Although he did not specifically recall the details of his conversations with George Spater of American Airlines or with George Steinbrenner III, discussed elsewhere, he does not dispute that he might have told them about, quote, special classes of contributors. Kalmbach stated that he had no idea until 1973 that their contributions came from corporate funds, and that with respect to Spater, he did not know until well after it had been made that the contribution had been given in cash. Kalmbach said that he did not participate in the industry-by-industry solicitation program headed by Buckley Byers, discussed elsewhere, with one exception. At the request of Maurice Stans, he agreed to solicit the major automobile contributors. He believes that prior to being asked by Stans, he had already solicited Henry Ford, who made a personal and family commitment of $100,000. Since Ford indicated the Ford Company executives were going to contribute through other channels, Kalmbach did not solicit them. In the case of Chrysler, he met Lynn Townsend in Detroit and took his standard approach after asking for a $100,000 goal. Footnote: there appears to be some confusion over the amount contributed by Chrysler executives to the campaign. Memoranda written by Robert Cratley of the FCRP staff and other campaign officials credit Chrysler Corporation with $300,000, but there is no known support for this figure. The Rosemary Woods list credits Chrysler Corporation employees with contributions totaling $133,844.09, including contributions by John J. Ricardo of $16,218.59 and $1,000. Ricardo has confirmed the $1,000 contribution, but has denied, in an affidavit submitted to the committee, any knowledge of the larger contribution, and there are no records or other data to contradict Ricardo's position. Townsend is credited on the Rosemary Woods list with $1,500 in contributions, which he has confirmed making. Records supplied by Chrysler to the committee credit its employees with total contributions of $121,054 to President Nixon, the Republican Party, the National Republican Party, and the Republican National Finance Committee. Of this amount, slightly over $33,000 is credited in Chrysler's records to, quote, President Nixon, end quote, and checks for the remaining amount were endorsed to RNC committees. However, since both Sloan and Paul Barrick, FCRP comptroller, say that their records and the Rosemary Woods list reflected contributions to the president's campaign alone, it appears that the most reliable figure for Chrysler employee contributions to the president's campaign is that on the Rosemary Woods list minus the $16,000 Ricardo contribution, or $117,626. End footnote. The solicitation of Richard Gerstenberg of General Motors also fit the general pattern. Kalmbach did not solicit executives of American Motors. Kalmbach stated that his practice was not to become involved in the discussion of specific industry or company or individual problems with the contributor, and he made it known, if the subject came up, that there could be no quid pro quo for any contribution. Kalmbach stated he violated his practice of not making a commitment for a post in return for a contribution on 2 occasions, in his discussions with J. Fife Symington and Vincent de Roulet treated elsewhere. Generally, Kalmbach traveled around the country meeting individually with various potential contributors. One exception to this practice was a White House dinner in mid-November 1970, attended by the President, John Mitchell, and several large potential contributors, Clement Stone, John Mulcahy, Richard Scaife, Kent Smith, and John Rollins, in addition to Kalmbach. There was no discussion of fundraising at the dinner or in the presence of the President, but after the dinner, Kalmbach and the potential contributors discussed what they could be expected to contribute to the 1972 campaign. According to Kalmbach, Stone and Mulcahy each had committed $1 million in 1971, a second million in 1972, and a third $1 million in 1973, if there was a deficit. In fact, Stone gave $2 million. Mulcahy gave approximately $600,000. He did not give more because, according to Kalmbach, he had contributed heavily to the 1970 campaign. Scaife said that he would give $1 million and gave that amount in 1971. Smith and Rollins did not commit themselves at the dinner, but were later seen individually by Kalmbach when each pledged $250,000. In all, Kalmbach solicited pledges of over $13.4 million. In fact, a total of $10,658,000 was given, with the principal reduction being the case of Mulcahy. Of this total, over $8.8 million was contributed prior to April 7, with over $1.8 million after April 7, 1972. Kalmbach emphasized the importance to his solicitation efforts of being able to assure potential contributors that their contributions would remain confidential if made before April 7. Kalmbach was also concerned about having his own solicitation role disclosed. In fact, Kalmbach resigned his position with FCRP when the new disclosure law went into effect on that date. An undated proposed budget, prepared for the campaign in the spring of 1971 by Jack Gleason and transmitted to Jeb Magruder, lists $40 million as needed for the campaign. This total was broken down as follows. Number of contributors required 1,082. 7. Size of each contribution $1 million. Average contribution $1,425,000. Amount $10 million. Number of contributors required 100. Size of each contribution $100,000. Average contribution $125,000. Amount $12,500,000. Number of contributors required 125. Size of each contribution $50,000. Average contribution $60,000. Amount $7,500,000. Number of contributors required 150. Size of each contribution $25,000. Average contribution $30,000. Amount $4,500,000. Number of contributors required 100. Size of each contribution $10,000. Average contribution, $15,000. Amount, $1,500,000. Number of contributors required, 100. Size of each contribution, $5,000. Average contribution, $7,500. Amount, $750,000. Number of contributors required, 500. Size of each contribution, $1,000. Average contribution, $2,500. Amount, $1,250,000. Total, $38 million. All other, including direct mail and TV, below $1,000, $1,500,000. Total, $39,500,000. Kalmbach's efforts thus amounted to a commitment for 1/3 of the total campaign budget, virtually all of which was committed prior to April 7, 1972. Most significant was the proportion of contributions in the highest ranges listed by Kalmbach. Of anticipated contributions of $100,000 or more, which constituted $22.5 million of the $40 million budget, Kalmbach solicited pledges of $12.725 million, or over 57% of the budgeted amount. Footnote: as noted, the amount ultimately realized was less than committed. In terms of actual contributions, Kalmbach was responsible for about $9.69 million of the total of $22.5 million required from contributors of $100,000 and over, or 43% of the amount sought. End footnote. The list of those persons solicited by Kalmbach, their actual contributions are: Annenberg, Walter, Wynwood, Pennsylvania, 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Great Britain. Goal, $250,000. Pre-April 7, $250,000. Post, $4,000. Total, $254,000. Ashley, Theodore, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Warner Brothers, Kinney Services. Goal, $150,000. Pre-April 7, $137,055. Total, $137,055. Beckett, McDonald, Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Welton, Beckett and Associates. Pre-April 7, $12,000. Post, $10,000. Total, $22,000. Berry, Lauren, Dayton, Ohio. 1972 affiliation, L. M. Berry and Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $102,000. Post, $9,700. Total, $111,700. Bobst, Elmer, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Warner Lambert. Goal, $125,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $54,500. Total, $154,500. Carlson, Edward, Prospect, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, United Airlines. Goal, $23,452. Pre-April 7, $23,452. Post, $1,500. Total, $24,952. Cato, Henry, San Antonio, Texas. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, El Salvador. Goal, $25,000. Pre-April 7, $25,000. Total, $25,000. Copley, James, La Jolla, California. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $500. Post, $29,978. Total, $30,478. Crown, Henry, Chicago, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, Henry Crown and Company. Goal, $25,000. Pre-April 7, $25,000. Total, $25,000. Cummings, Theodore, Beverly Hills, California. 1972 affiliation, Pacific Coast Properties. Goal, $50,000 to $100,000. Pre-April 7, $46,406. Total, $46,406. DeRoulet, Vincent, Manhasset, New York. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Jamaica. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $3,500. Total, $103,500. Farkas, Dr. Ruth L., New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Alexander's Department Store. Goal, $300,000. Post, $300,000. Total, $300,000. Firestone, Leonard K., Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $15,100. Total, $115,100. Fisher, Max, Detroit, Michigan. 1972 affiliation, Fisher New Center Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $125,000. Post, $125,000. Total, $250,000. Ford family, Grosse Pointe, Michigan. 1972 affiliation, Ford Motor Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $103,276. Post, $24,000. Total, $127,276. Gerstenberg, Richard, Detroit, Michigan. 1972 affiliation, General Motors. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $51,012. Total, $51,012. Getty, J. Paul, Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Getty Oil Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $75,000. Post, $50,000. Total, $125,000. Gould, Kingdon, Laurel, Maryland. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Luxembourg. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $1,900. Total, $101,900. Guest, Raymond, King George, Virginia. Goal, $200,000. Pre-April 7, $200,000. Post, $1,000. Total, $201,000. Hines, Henry, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 1972 affiliation, H.J. Heinz Company. Goal, $100,000. Post, $103,741. Total, $103,741. Hoffman, Wayne, Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Flying Tiger Corporation. Goal, $30,000. Pre-April 7, $30,000. Total, $30,000. Hume, John, St. Paul, Minnesota. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Austria. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $500. Total, $100,500. Isbell, Marion W., Phoenix, Arizona. 1972 affiliation, Ramada Inn. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $41,241. Total, $41,241. Jones, Thomas U., Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Northrop Corporation. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $53,000. Total, $153,000. Keith, Williard. 1972 affiliation, Marsh, McLennan, Cosgrove and Company. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 6, $56,606. Total, $56,606. Lasden, William, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Warner Lambert. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $40,000. Post, $69,000. Total, $109,000. Levy, Gustav. 1972 affiliation, Goldman Sachs and Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $70,442. Post, $21,000. Total, $91,442. Lewis, Lawrence, Richmond, Virginia. 1972 affiliation, Flagler Hotels. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $90,000. Post, $6,490. Total, $96,490. Liedtke, William, Houston, Texas. 1972 affiliation, Pennzoil. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $23,384. Post, $1,000. Total, $24,384. McClure, Harold, Alma, Michigan. 1972 affiliation, Patrick Petroleum Company. Goal, $50,000. Post, $26,100. Total, $26,100. McGaw, Foster, Evanston, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, American Hospital Supply Company. Goal, $200,000. Post, $155,786. Total, $155,786. Marshall, Anthony, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Trinidad. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $48,505. Total, $48,505. Maytag, L.B., Colorado Springs, Colorado. 1972 affiliation, National Airlines. Goal, not solicited. Pre-April 7, $50,000. Total, $50,000. Miller, Edward, employees of Seattle, Washington. 1972 affiliation, Time Oil Company. Goal, no goal. Pre-April 7, $25,000. Total, $25,000. Miller, Otto, San Francisco, California. 1972 affiliation, Standard Oil of California. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $50,000. Total, $50,000. Mitchell, Charles and Associates, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, City Service. Goal, no goal. Pre-April 7, $28,000. Total, $28,000. Moore, John, Dublin, Ireland. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Ireland. Goal, $10,000. Post, $10,442. Total, $10,442. Mulcahy, John, Bronxville, New York. 1972 affiliation, Ugleco, Pfizer subsidiary. Goal, $3 million. Pre-April 7, $573,558. Post, $26,000. Total, $599,558. Olin, John, St. Louis, Missouri. 1972 affiliation, Olin Corporation. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $4,500. Total, $104,500. Olin, Spencer. Pre-April 7, minus $94,413. Pappas, Thomas, Boston, Massachusetts. 1972 affiliation, Esso Pappas Refinery. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,672. Post, $1,000. Total, $101,672. Flegger, George, Newport Beach, California. 1972 affiliation, Emerson Electric Company. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $47,088. Total, $47,088. Robertson, James, San Francisco, California. 1972 affiliation, Goldman Sachs. Goal, $50,000. Post, $32,500. Total, $32,500. Rickless, Meshulam, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Rapid American Corporation. Goal, no goal. Pre-April 7, $50,000. Post, $141,000. Total, $191,000. Rockefeller family. 1972 affiliation, Rockefeller Foundation. Goal, $200,000. Pre-April 7, $200,000. Post, $69,000. Total, $269,000. Rockwell, Willard F., employees. El Segundo, California. 1972 affiliation, N.A. Rockwell. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $98,270. Post, $2,500. Total, $100,770. Rollin, John. Wilmington, Delaware. 1972 affiliation, Rollins International. Goal, $250,000. Pre-April 7, $245,023. Post, $15,500. Total, $260,523. Safer, John. Bethesda, Maryland. 1972 affiliation, Real Estate. Goal, $250,000. Pre-April 7, $250,000. Post, $1,000. Total, $251,000. Salvatore, Henry. Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Grant Oil and Tool Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $99,415. Post, $12,458. Total, $111,873. Scafee, Richard. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 1972 affiliation, Mellon Banking Gulf Oil. Goal, $1 million. Pre-April 7, $1 million. Post, $3,500. Total, $1,003,500. Schreiber, Taft. Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Music Corporation of America. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $66,101. Post, $9,700. Total, $75,801. Schuler, John. Leeds, Alabama. 1972 affiliation, Anderson Electric Company. Goal, $25,000. Pre-April 7, $17,018. Post, $10,536. Total, $27,554. Shaheen, John. New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Macmillan Ring Free Oil Company. Goal, $100,000. Post, $104,000. Total, $104,000. Simon, William. 1972 affiliation, Salmon Brothers. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $2,500. Total, $102,500. Spater, George. Chicago, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, American Airlines. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $75,000. Total, $75,000. Stein, Jules. Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Music Corporation of America. Goal, $150,000. Pre-April 7, $117,822. Total, $117,822. Steinbrenner, George. Cleveland, Ohio. 1972 affiliation, American Shipbuilding Company. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Total, $100,000. Stewart, James E. Greenwich, Connecticut. 1972 affiliation, Lone Star Industries, Union Oil. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $50,000. Post, $47,525. Total, $97,525. Stone, Clement, Chicago, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, Combined Insurance Company. Goal, $3 million. Pre-April 7, $2 million. Post, $73,054. Total, $2,073,054. Symington, J. Fife, Paradise Valley, Arizona. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, Trinidad and Tobago. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $1,500. Total, $101,500. Terra, Daniel J., Kenilworth, Illinois. 1972 affiliation, Lauter Chemical Company. Goal, $250,000. Pre-April 7, $250,000. Post, $5,000. Total, $255,000. Townsend, Lynn, employees. Detroit, Michigan. 1972 affiliation, Chrysler Corporation. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $117,626. Total, $117,626. Walker, Alicia, New York, New York. 1972 affiliation, Director, Petroleum Corporation of America. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Total, $100,000. Wallace, DeWitt, Mount Kisco, New York. 1972 affiliation, Reader's Digest. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $3,900. Total, $103,900. Warner, Jack, Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Warner Brothers. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $100,000. Post, $10,500. Total, $110,500. Washburn, Mrs. Donald, Corona del Mar, California. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $50,000. Post, $10,520. Total, $60,520. Watson, Arthur, New Canaan, Connecticut. 1972 affiliation, Ambassador, France. Goal, $300,000. Pre-April 7, $300,000. Post, $3,000. Total, $303,000. Watson, Tom, Greenwich, Connecticut. 1972 affiliation, Chairman, Executive Committee, IBM. Goal, $25,000. Post, $15,500. Total, $15,500. Watt, R.A., Los Angeles, California. 1972 affiliation, Watt Industries. Goal, $100,000. Pre-April 7, $86,568. Post, $4,000. Total, $90,568. Webb, Dell, North Hollywood, California. 1972 affiliation, Chairman, Dell E. Webb Corporation. Goal, $50,000. Post, $87,676. Total, $87,676. Willard, LeBaron, Baltimore, Maryland. 1972 affiliation, Chairman, Commercial Credit Company. Goal, $3,000. Pre-April 7, $3,000. Post, $6,250. Total, $9,250. Whitney, Cornelius V., Lexington, Kentucky. 1972 affiliation, Whitney Industries. Goal, $50,000. Pre-April 7, $9,000. Post, $42,000. Total, $51,000. Total goal, $13,441,452. Total pre-April 7, $8,835,040. Total post, $1,823,356. Grand total, $10,658,396. Union activity. Labor unions with membership in excess of 18 million and assets in excess of $4 billion are at the very least one of the most potent political forces. As noted in the section of this report on the results of questionnaires sent to union officials, union political action arms played a major funding role in the presidential campaign of Senator McGovern. Although using a bipartisan approach, most of the principal unions directed their major efforts to giving support for Senator McGovern. Two instances of the activities of unions and their political action arms warrant comment, one involving the United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, and the Farm Workers Political Education Fund, and the other the Seafarers International Union and the Seafarers Political Action Donation Committee. A. Farm Workers Political Education Fund. One unusual instance wherein campaign contributions were furnished to a union came to the attention of the committee through the testimony of Ms. Dolores Huerta. On October 26, 1973, Ms. Huerta, in testimony before the Senate Select Committee, described the activities and relationship between the 1972 Presidential Committee, El Pueblo con McGovern, and United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, and the Farm Workers Political Education Fund. Ms. Huerta furnished information to the committee concerning the participation of union members in political activities for the McGovern presidential campaign, and furnished documents with regard to the funding of these activities. The entire amount of money raised by El Pueblo con McGovern, a campaign committee composed of union leaders and supporters in 1972, was contributed to it by various McGovern campaign committees, including McGovern Central Control Fund, a presidential committee, in a total amount of $75,200. A breakdown is as follows. Contributions or transfers to El Pueblo con McGovern: McGovern Central Control Fund, $523.72, $5,000. McGovern Central Control Fund, $530.72, $12,500. McGovern Central Control Fund, 6-2-72, $25,000. Democratic National Committee, 824.72, $10,000. Democratic National Committee, 928.72, $1,200. McGovern Campaign Committee, 912.72, $10,000. Northern California McGovern Campaign Committee, 914.72, $1,500. Total contributions from McGovern campaign, $75,200. Other contributions. United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, this contribution is an error on reports and should be considered an expense, 1031.72, $1,503.74. Miscellaneous, $16.75. Total contributions, $76,720.49. Total expenditures of El Pueblo con McGovern were $72,586.34. Of this amount, a total of $36,593.28 went directly to United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, or its satellite groups, for the reasons detailed below. United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, reimbursement for office rent, overload, and buses, $725.72, $4,921.30. National Farm Workers Service Center, Incorporated, office rental, $830.72, $113.86. United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, reimbursement for personal services, $725.72, $11,538. Robert F. Kennedy Farm Workers Medical Plan reimbursement for personal services, $6,672, $700. National Farm Workers Service Center, Incorporated, reimbursement for personal services, $6,572, $1,230. United Farm Workers, AFL-CIO, reimbursement for personal services, office overhead, and supplies, $10,1672, $8,515. National Farm Workers Ministry, office overhead and supplies, $10,772, $1,172.43. National Farm Workers Service Center, office rental, $10,772, $115.82. Total, $36,593.28. Miss Huerta testified that in August of 1973, the McGovern Central Control Fund gave to the Farm Workers Political Education Fund a remaining cash balance in the amount of $4,134.15 as, quote, a gift. This $4,134.15 came to the McGovern Central Control Fund from El Pueblo con McGovern when that committee terminated its activities. B. Seafarers Political Action Donation Committee. The Seafarers Political Action Donation Committee, SPAD, was established by the Seafarers International Union in 1962 for the purpose of, quote, accepting voluntary contributions by rank-and-file members of the Union and to make disbursements on their behalf for political purposes, end quote. On October 31, 1972, SPAD applied to the Chemical Bank of New York for a loan of $100,000. The next day, November 1, loan agreements were reached, $100,000 was placed in SPAD's account with the bank, and the following day a check for $100,000 was made payable to the Finance Committee to re-elect the president. According to John Wynne, General Counsel of the Chemical Bank of New York, and Leo Schneider, Vice President of Chemical Bank, the bank was initially contacted by Ralph Buckbinder, an accountant retained by the Seafarers, by telephone on October 31, 1972. Schneider then prepared a memorandum concerning the loan that same day and forwarded it to Bank Vice President Frank Frederickson, who is the vice president in charge of, quote, political loans. Frederickson approved the loan because it seemed to be, in all respects, legal to him. Footnote: when asked as to whether he had taken Section 610's ban on union monies raised through commercial transactions into account, he said that he was unfamiliar with this provision. In addition, Section 610 requires that unions can raise political contribution funds only from the voluntary acts of its members. Thus, it appears that the ability of SPAD to repay the loan would depend upon the willingness of SIU members to contribute. End footnote. Frederickson stated that he had the final say on whether the loan was approved, and any discussions of the loan did not go any higher than himself. The loan was supposed to have been repaid in 3 to 6 months, but the final payment was not received until October 16, 1973. Howard Schulman, general counsel for the Seafarers Union and SPAD, and DiGiorgio, in staff interviews, corroborated the above account. They explained that Mr. Nixon's record in aiding the revitalization of the maritime industry had prompted the contribution. They produced a statement issued by Paul Hall, president of the Seafarers International, on October 19, 1972, announcing the formation of the National Maritime Committee to re-elect the president. Hall was the national chairman for this committee, which represented management and labor from all segments of the maritime industry. In his statement, Mr. Hall listed 5 definitive actions, including the passage of the Merchant Marine Act of 1970, the first new maritime legislation since 1936 taken by the Nixon administration to strengthen the maritime industry. At the conclusion of his statement, Mr. Hall said, quote, "We in the maritime industry have found, on the basis of performance, that we can believe in Richard Nixon. We in the maritime industry therefore support his candidacy for re-election." End quote. Footnote. On June 30, 1970, Paul Hall, 7 other union officials, and SIU were indicted for violations of the Corrupt Practices Act on charges of conspiracy to contribute union funds to a political campaign. In May 1972, the case was dismissed by the U.S. District Court sitting in Brooklyn for failure on the part of the Justice Department to prosecute the case. The Justice Department decided not to appeal the dismissal. Union officials state that there was no connection between these events and SPAD's contribution, and no evidence has been found to contradict these statements. End footnote. Both men interviewed indicated that they knew of no solicitation of any union or SPAD official by officials of the FCRP. The $100,000 check for the Finance Committee to re-elect the president was delivered to Herbert Brand, president of the Transportation Institute of Washington, D.C., because he was a member of the Maritime Committee to re-elect the president and was located in Washington, D.C. Brand, in a telephone interview, said he was not aware of the Seafarers' contribution until it was delivered to him on November 3, 1972. He said he delivered the check to FCRP headquarters in Washington on November 6 and gave it to Tom Evans because he was the only person that he knew there. Footnote. The contribution was not reported for 2 months. Section 304A of the Federal Elections Campaign Act of 1971 states that, quote, "Any contribution of $5,000 or more received after the last report is filed prior to the election shall be reported within 48 hours after its receipt." End quote. End footnote. The Select Committee, whether by its questionnaires or its limited investigations, made no attempt to engage in a comprehensive survey of union political activity. It is believed, therefore, that an appropriate committee of Congress should review certain questions not considered in detail by this committee. Among these questions are: 1. What is the structure and nature of union, political, and educational committees? 2. What are the techniques by which the rank-and-file membership are solicited to participate with their dollars? 3. To what extent is the participation by union membership voluntary, and what pressures, if any, are brought to bear to ensure participation? 4. Is there a minimum level, dollars, of required or expected participation? 5. After having participated, what voice does the union member have in the decision relating to the ultimate distribution of the funds collected? 6. What accounting is made to the union member concerning the use of his political contribution? 7. Are the representations and educational materials made available to union members broad in spectrum or related to a specific candidate and party? 8. Are individual union members afforded the opportunity to have their political views published in in-house organs when they differ from the publicly stated position of the principal union executive? 9. Is the public endorsement by the union executive based on a vote of the union members? End of Section 10. Recording by Linda Johnson.
Section 11 of The Watergate Report, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marianne Spiegel. Final Report of the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, Volume 2. Chapter 4, Campaign Financing, Part 11. 5. Robert H. Allen, Mexican checks. A search by police of the 5 men arrested in the Watergate burglary on June 17, 1972, produced $6,500 in new $100 bills, most of which were serially numbered. In the process of tracing these bills, it was discovered that 5 checks totaling $114,000 originally contributed to the Finance Committee to re-elect the president had been run through an account of one of the Watergate burglars, Bernard Baker. 4 of these checks, totaling $89,000, had been drawn on an account in the Banco Internacional of Mexico City and were payable to Manuel Orgario de Weir, a Mexican national. Shortly afterward, it was established that Orgario used a $100,000 check drawn on the account of the Compañía de Azufre de Veracruz S.A., hereafter referred to as CAVSA, CAVSA, to negotiate the 4 bank drafts. CAVSA is a wholly owned subsidiary of Gulf Resources and Chemical Company, Houston, Texas. The sequence of events that set this transaction in motion had its origin in late 1971 or early 1972, when a group of prominent Houston area businessmen joined together to form a loosely knit organization known as the Texas Ad Hoc Fundraising Committee. The purpose of this committee was to raise funds for the president prior to the effective date of the new disclosure law on April 7, 1972. Included among the members of the group were William Littke, the president of Pennzoil and the unofficial chairman of the ad hoc committee, Roy Winchester, Pennzoil's vice president in charge of public relations, and Robert Allen, the president of Gulf Resources and Chemical Company. On March 10, 1972, Maurice Stans met with the ad hoc committee in Houston to discuss their fundraising activities. A few days after this meeting, Littke said he received a call from Allen, who informed him he could raise some funds, United States funds, in Mexico. Allen, who had met Stans for the first time on the 10th, asked Littke to check with Maury and see if that created any problems. Allen testified he asked Littke to see if there were any problems with a U.S. citizen making a contribution through Mexico. Littke called Stans, who indicated he would get back to him later with an answer. Allen has since confirmed the citizen he was referring to above was himself, and the reason he was considering Mexico was his desire to maintain his anonymity. He stated, "When I spoke to Littke, a sort of vague or undecided route was to sell securities that I had and to make a transfer to another bank, perhaps a Mexican bank. I knew full well if I made a contribution in the usual manner, that is, just to write a check to Littke, that first of all my bankers would know, and secondly my stockholders would know, and I would have to assume in our stockholder group, and there would be the usual speculation about why I made the contribution, and I would expect from it the usual unfavorable, let's say distasteful, aspect of it." Allen testified that between March 10th and March 21st he discussed with his attorney, Richard Haynes, the legality of a contribution made in this manner. When asked about the context of the conversation, Allen invoked attorney-client privilege. On March 21st, Allen went to Mexico City to see Orgario, who, for many years, had been retained by CAVSA as its labor counsel. The stated purpose of the Allen meeting with Ogarrio was to discuss a fee allegedly owed to Ogarrio by CAVSA for work done in connection with the shutdown of CAVSA in 1970. Allen stated Ogarrio had the assignment of complying with the labor law, which basically says that we had to pay each man 3 months plus 30 days for each year worked for us, and getting approval from the Labor Department and getting negotiations completed with the union to accept whatever plan was adopted. Also, because of a new labor law being enacted, it was necessary for these negotiations to be completed prior to mid-1970. Allen related, Ogarrio not only satisfactorily completed his work prior to the enactment of the labor law, thereby saving the company a substantial amount of money, but secured a settlement for $250,000 less than the company's reserve for the settlement. Ogarrio was to be compensated above his retainer for these services. Allen stated the reason Ogarrio had not been paid earlier by CAVSA was that the fee asked by Ogarrio was considered too high, and Diaz de Leon, president of CAVSA, had requested Allen to speak with Ogarrio personally. De Leon sent Allen a memorandum to this effect, which is dated December 17, 1971. Allen also stated that on numerous occasions De Leon had orally requested that Allen speak to Ogarrio. Allen said because of other pressing matters, March 21, 1972 was the first opportunity he had to see Ogarrio. Allen claimed that Ogarrio had been orally requesting a $250,000 fee, even though he, Ogarrio, had submitted a bill to De Leon on July 7, 1971 for $125,000. Allen explained that this $125,000 statement was not a final bill but rather a negotiating document, and that despite its submittal, Ogarrio was still discussing a $250,000 fee. Ogarrio, Allen, and De Leon met immediately after Allen's arrival in Mexico City on the 21st. Allen related that they had a candid meeting in which fees ranging from $250,000 amount downward to the $125,000 bill and below were discussed. Allen said that no final settlement was reached and that he instructed Ogarrio to go back and sharpen his pencil. When asked if there was any further discussion concerning the amount of the bill, Allen replied, "We left it in a very cordial way that he would communicate with Diaz de Leon and let Pepe, de Leon, know what his bottom line was, and my clear indication to him was that we would pay it." Allen said he had no discussions with Ogarrio concerning this fee subsequent to this meeting. Allen and Ogarrio met again on the 24th, Allen's last day in Mexico. Allen said at this meeting, for the first time, he turned to the question of raising money to make his contribution to FCRP. However, he decided not to disclose to Ogarrio the intended purpose of the needed money. Allen described this meeting with Ogarrio. On that Friday, or the last day that I was there, I had lunch with him and told him that I had a project that I was contemplating pursuing, and that it would require short-term financing or some short-term financing, and that I had concluded that I wanted to arrange financing outside the eastern area, and that I was undecided. But I had not determined what the amount would be, but it would be no less than $50,000 and no more than $100,000, and that I wanted his advice on what sort of collateral he felt might be required for such financing from a Mexican bank, pointing out to him that I knew people in the banks there very well, and having done as much business as we have done, and that how long did he think it would take. I explained to him if I did not get it done by April 1st, I was not going to pursue it. His response was that I was aware Holy Week was coming up and the banking community closes down in Mexico on Holy Week, as most other businesses, and that might interfere with it. But he felt that there would be no problem. He asked me what kind of collateral I might have available. I told him I could put a substantial amount of money on deposit as an example, or I could perhaps use stocks as collateral, something of that nature. And I told him that I might even be able to arrange a guarantee from a U.S. bank if that was necessary. In other words, we agreed that there was collateral. So that was the nature of my explanation. He said, well, that he was not, as I say, this was on Friday, I believe, that he was not sure that it would be possible to get it done before April 1st, but maybe a few days after that. Without telling him why, I just said April 1st was my sort of personal deadline. I either had to do it by then, or I was not going to pursue that route. He said, well, if we are only talking about for the short-term financing, I said no more than 180 days. He said that should not take us more than a couple of weeks to get it done anyway, even with the financing. When are you coming back? I said, I will be back again next week, or within the next 10 days. He said, well, if there's any real problem, and you really are concerned about April 1st, I will advance you the money you need. We talked about that a bit. First I said I would not want you to do that. He said, well, I insist. The usual sort of thing that particularly Mexican businessmen or friends like he would say. So I said, well, in that case, if I decide to do it, I will leave a note and I will get right down to it and get it done. And that was the total substance of our conversation. Despite having told Ogarrio that he would be back in the next week to 10 days when he would complete the transaction, Allen stated that I went back to the office either that afternoon or before I left town anyway and typed up a very simple promissory note, one that was designed to indemnify or at least to protect Manuel if I got run over by a truck or something, and put it in an envelope, signed it, left the dates blank, handed it to Diaz de Leon, and told him that I might want him to take care of some business for me that had to do with Manuel Ogarrio, and I'd be in touch. The note prepared by Allen personally was for the amount of $100,000, the higher of the two amounts, according to Allen, that he had mentioned to Ogarrio. Allen said he called Ogarrio after writing the note, but before leaving town, and told him that either he or De Leon would be in touch with him if he decided to go through with the project. On the way out of Mexico, Allen said that De Leon told me that Manuel Ogarrio had called him and said that he was going to pare his $125,000 bill by $25,000, but he was going to add back some expenses. When Allen got back to Houston, he told Arthur Urich, Vice President of Finance, that the matter with Ogarrio had been settled and Diaz de Leon would be talking about it, and I thought the settlement was $100,000 to go ahead and process it. On April 3, 1972, Letke called Stans because he had never received an answer for Allen on the Mexican funds. Stans told Letke to call back that afternoon and he would have an answer. Stans testified at public session. On April 3rd of last year, I received a telephone call from Letke, who was then our finance chairman for the state of Texas. He said, I have a U.S. citizen residing in Texas who is a prospective contributor for $100,000, but he wants to give it in U.S. funds that are now in Mexico. Is this legal? I said, I am quite sure it is, but let me check again and I will call you back. I checked with our legal counsel, found it was perfectly legal for a U.S. citizen to give any foreign funds he wanted, and called back to Letke and told him so. Letke notified Allen it was all right to bring the funds up. On April 3rd, apparently without further word from Ogarrio as to the amount of the settlement, $100,000 was telephonically transferred from Gulf Resources and Chemical Company to the CAVSA account at the Banco Internacional. According to Allen, this payment was received by CAVSA and converted to a check to Ogarrio dated April 4th, 1973. Allen testified that on April 4th he was in New York, and he called De Leon from the airport there. Allen told De Leon to fill in the April 4th date on the note also. I told him to deliver the envelope to Mr. Ogarrio, to assist him in any way that he could to take the proceeds of the note and to deliver them to Mr. Winchester's office at Pennzoil. Ogarrio had received no further notice regarding the loan since he and Allen talked on March 24th. Allen also told De Leon to obtain cash from Ogarrio and instructed him when the money had to be there. In addition to the envelope which Allen says De Leon delivered on the 4th, De Leon also took Ogarrio a CAVSA check for $100,000 in payment of Ogarrio's bill. A report by the accounting firm of Arthur Anderson and Company to the Audit Committee of Gulf Resources and Chemical, dated May 4, 1973, notes that they were unable to locate either an invoice or a receipt in support of the $100,000 payment to Ogarrio. Allen acknowledged that between speaking with Ogarrio on March 24th and the delivery of the note to him on April 4th, he had not communicated with Ogarrio. He also acknowledged that there had been no agreement as to an interest rate, even though in typing the note he stated an interest rate of 10% per annum. In fact, although Allen said that he and Ogarrio were talking about a loan in the range of $50,000 or $100,000, he proceeded to prepare the note for $100,000 without further raising the question with Ogarrio. According to Allen, De Leon attempted to comply with his instructions. However, he encountered difficulties. De Leon called Allen later on the 4th to inform him that they were not able to secure enough cash. After some discussion, a combination of bank drafts and cash were decided upon, and the proceeds were given to De Leon. Per Allen's instructions, De Leon delivered $100,000 consisting of 4 checks totaling $89,000 and $11,000 in cash to Winchester and Letke at Pennzoil's office in Houston on the afternoon of April 5th. As recounted by Letke and Winchester, De Leon asked for a receipt, but Letke related, I told him that we didn't want to give him a receipt, that he could get a receipt from Washington, that we were merely agreeing to transmit the funds to Washington. De Leon did not mention the source of the funds. The $100,000 was placed in a suitcase, which already contained some $600,000 raised by 6 other ad hoc members. Late that afternoon, Winchester and another Pennzoil employee flew to Washington by a Pennzoil Company jet. At 10 p.m. on the evening of April 5th, Winchester delivered the $700,000 to Hugh Sloan at FCRP headquarters in Washington, D.C. The following day, Winchester went back to FCRP headquarters to give an accounting of the funds. With regard to the $100,000 raised in Mexico, Winchester said he listed Allen as the person who raised the money. Asked why he did not list Ogario as the donor of the $89,000, Winchester and Ledke said they knew that Ogario was not the donor. Asked further how they could be sure of this, they replied, "We just knew." Sloan testified that he received the 4 Mexican checks from Winchester, but was unsure how they were to be handled. He checked with Stans, and out of this conversation it was decided to seek the advice of committee counsel G. Gordon Liddy. It was decided that Liddy would take care of the checks. Liddy took the 5 checks to Florida, where he asked Bernard Baker to cash them. Baker returned the proceeds to Liddy some weeks later. Liddy then placed the funds, less $2,500 for processing, in a safe in Stan's office, where they were commingled with other cash funds. On or about July 7th, after it was discovered that the Mexican checks had gone through Barker's bank account, Frederick LaRue, an FCRP official, called Roy Winchester to ascertain the source of the funds. Winchester put LaRue in touch with Allen. LaRue warned Allen that the FBI would be contacting him and Ogario. Allen, in turn, contacted Ogario through De Leon to alert him of an impending visit. According to an FBI report, when interviewed by agents on July 10, 1972, Ogario advised them that he was given a check for $100,000, which he negotiated into the foregoing 4 bank drafts and cash, as a favor to an American client for 20 years standing, who he refused to identify other than as a reliable American company with operations in Mexico. Continuing, he said, he signed the checks, making them negotiable, and turned them and the remaining $11,000 cash over to his client, and he believed the purpose of the transaction was to convey money to the Republican Party anonymously. Subsequently to the LaRue-Allen telephone conversation, Allen, Winchester, and LaRue met in Pennzoil's apartment in the Watergate complex. Allen said he told LaRue, "Unless this can be straightened out right away, we just want the money back." LaRue said he never discussed the return of the money with Allen. Allen appeared before a grand jury in Houston, Texas on September 7, 1972. According to an FBI account, he told the jurors that the $100,000 contribution was a personal contribution by him. Allen conceded to the committee that in his testimony he did not refer to the existence of the promissory note, which was the only physical evidence documenting the $100,000 loan to him by Ogario. Allen said he was not asked for the note, nor did he voluntarily submit it. Throughout the fall, Allen said he continued to have discussions with Stans, Parkinson, LaRue, and others. Allen explained that, plus on numerous occasions, I have said that the way I think this can be solved best is just to give me my money back, agonizing with them about the timing, what sort of publicity would come out of it. Quite candidly, I was as worried about doing anything at all that would interfere with the election. I was finance chairman for the state of Texas. There was a certain amount, there certainly, perhaps, would have been a negative kind of indication to the people that I was trying to get contributions at the time, if I, in fact, had asked for money or gotten it back. At the same time, of course, I was spending practically every day trying to ward off the press who were making the most god-awful assumptions about the whole matter. You may dream of them. They made them. In addition to Allen, his attorney, Haynes had conversations with Parkinson and LaRue that concerned Allen's contribution. When asked to disclose the nature of these conversations, attorney-client privilege was again invoked, even though these conversations were between Haynes and third parties who were not his clients. The promissory note came payable on October 2, 1972. Allen said that he told De Leon to tell Manuel Ogario that I am ready to do something. According to Allen, by this time Ogario was in such terrible straits about the way he was being pilloried and maligned by the press in Mexico, his view was, look, let's just do nothing until we see this whole thing through. I know precisely what the situation is, and we both feel uncomfortable about it. So I would say, by his request or mutual agreement, it was decided that I would not pay the note until some time he felt comfortable about it. 6 weeks later, on November 16, 1972, Allen sent Ogario a personal check for $100,000. The funds used by Allen to cover his check were obtained by borrowing $100,000 from a commercial bank. The loan was a standard bank loan for 90 days. It was not until December 15, 1972, that Allen paid the interest owed on the Ogario note. He explained that Ogario was suggesting perhaps a substantial or meaningful fee ought to be tacked onto this as a result of his considerable, because of the inconvenience, let's say, that he experienced, and perhaps the damage to his reputation, the time spent, and so on. No such charge was ever levied. Allen wrote to Stans on January 23, 1972, asking that his $100,000 be returned. In the last paragraph of his letter, Allen states, "In addition to the above, there are personal reasons why I must request that my contribution be returned." A $100,000 check was drawn on the account of the Media Committee to re-elect the president and was given the following day. 3 days later, on January 26, 1973, Allen issued a check payable to the Republic National Bank of Houston to repay his $100,000 loan, which had been used to repay the Ogario loan. When asked about his net worth, Allen indicated it was between $1 million and $1.6 million, depending on the stock market. However, on a balance sheet supplied by Allen to the Republic National Bank on October 31, 1972, by Allen, he lists his net worth at $782,000. Thus, the $100,000 represented a contribution of 12.7% of his net worth to President Nixon's re-election campaign. In deciding the amount of his contribution, Allen testified, "It was not related to my net worth, really. It related to what I thought would be a meaningful sized contribution in relation to what I would do for the next 4 years or maybe longer." The question of the Mexican checks surfaced again in the edited transcripts of presidential conversations. According to the transcripts on March 13, 1973, John Dean and the president discussed the Allen contribution. Dean: "Anyway, I don't care about that. What happened to this Texas guy that gets his money back? Was he— all hell broke loose for him that week, this Allen." President: No. Allen. Dean: "Allen, not Duncan nor unintelligible. All hell broke loose for Allen for this reason. The money apparently originally came out of a subsidiary of one of Allen's corporations down in Mexico. It went to a lawyer in Mexico who put it down as a fee billed to the subsidiary, and then the lawyer sent it back into the States and it came back up here. But the weakness of it is that the Mexican lawyer, 1, didn't have a legitimate fee, 2, it could be a corporate contribution. So Allen had personally put up a note with the corporation to cover it. Allen, meanwhile, is having problems with his wife, and a divorce is pending, and tax problems." President: Inaudible. Watergate. Dean: "I don't know what that went into the letter. It wasn't used for the Watergate. That is the interesting thing." President: "It wasn't?" Dean: "No, it was not. What happened is that these Mexican checks came in. They were given to Gordon Liddy and said, 'Why don't you get these cashed?' Gordon Liddy, in turn, put them down to this fellow Barker in Florida, who said he could cash these Mexican checks and put them with your Barker's bank account in here. They could have been just as easily cashed at the Riggs Bank. There was nothing wrong with the checks. Why all that rigmarole? It is just like a lot of other things that happened over there. God knows why it was all done. It was totally unnecessary, and it was not directly involved in the Watergate. It wasn't a wash operation to get money back to Liddy and the like." When asked by the committee staff about the basis for his statement to the president, Dean said that he had no specific information concerning the source of Allen's contribution and was speculating. During his committee executive session, Allen was asked about the alleged corporate source of these contributions. Dorson: "As a conclusory question, Mr. Allen, was there any connection between the payment of a fee to Ogario for and your obtaining $100,000 from Ogario as a means to make a contribution to the president's re-election campaign?" Allen: "None." End of section 11.